Waiter humiliates ordinary black man, without realizing he owned the entire franchise. Marcus Sterling narrowed his eyes when he saw the man walk in. That type of person didn't belong there. He was sure of it. After 23 years working in the finest restaurants in the region, the man wore plain clothes, a worn-out jacket, and a wool cap that hid part of his face. Before the newcomer could even open his mouth, Marcus was already approaching with firm steps. "I'm sorry, sir, but all our tables are reserved today," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The man looked around the dining room. At least 6 tables were visibly empty, with folded napkins waiting for the next customers. "I don't need a reservation," he replied calmly. "I just came to take a look and maybe have a cup of coffee." "I understand, but our establishment has a very specific policy. Perhaps you'd feel more comfortable at the corner bakery. It's more accessible." The word hung in the air like a poorly disguised insult. The man took a deep breath, his fingers lightly gripping the hem of his jacket. "Look, man, I just want to sit for a bit. It's been a long day." Marcus crossed his arms, his posture growing stiffer. "Our coffee costs $12. A simple meal doesn't come to less than $90. I'm sure there are more suitable options within your budget nearby." Some customers started looking in their direction. An elderly woman with grey hair looked away, embarrassed. A young couple whispered to each other. "You don't even know how much money I have," the man said, his voice still controlled but with a hint of sadness Marcus didn't catch. "I don't need to know. I've worked here for over 20 years and I've developed an eye for these things. And frankly, sir, your presence is making our regular customers uncomfortable." The waitress Megan, who had only been working there for 3 months, approached timidly. "Marcus, maybe we could—" "Megan, go back to your tables." He cut her off without even looking at her. "I'm handling this." The plainly dressed man stood still for a few more seconds, his eyes fixed on Marcus. There was something in that gaze the waiter couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't anger, maybe disappointment, or something deeper. "I understand," the man said finally. "Sorry for bothering you." He turned and walked slowly toward the door. His shoulders seemed slightly more hunched than when he'd come in. Marcus watched until he disappeared into the street, feeling a strange pang of something he didn't want to identify, but he pushed the feeling away quickly. He had done the right thing. He had protected the establishment's standards. That's why Vincent, the manager, valued him so much. Vincent. The thought of his boss made Marcus straighten his shoulders again. He returned to his post near the entrance, adjusting the black vest of his uniform. Within minutes he had already forgotten the incident, focused on welcoming a well-dressed couple who had just arrived. What Marcus didn't know was that Vincent was at that very moment in the back of the restaurant, finishing a virtual meeting, an important meeting about the recent changes in the management of the Heritage Dining Group, changes that hadn't yet been officially announced to the staff. 20 minutes later, Vincent came out of his makeshift office in the back of the restaurant. He was a 52-year-old man with hair starting to grey at the temples and a perpetually worried expression. Today, that worry seemed even more intense. "Did anyone see an older gentleman arrive a little while ago?" he asked, his voice coming out louder than usual. "Simple jacket, maybe wearing a cap." Marcus turned from the counter where he was organizing some menus. "Oh, yes. I had to send away a fellow who clearly wasn't in the right place." "Don't worry, Vincent. I handled it without making a scene." The color drained from Vincent's face. What exactly did he look like?" "Oh, a middle-aged man, shabby clothes, the type you can tell can't afford to eat here. Why do you ask?" Vincent's hands began to tremble. He was gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. You sent him away?" "Of course. I suggested the corner bakery, which is more suited to his budget." "Marcus, Vincent had to lean against the wall. "That man is Arthur Harrison, the new owner of the entire Heritage Dining Group." The silence that followed was so deep you could hear the ticking of the old clock hanging on the wall. Marcus felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under his feet. His mouth opened and closed a few times without making a sound. That's not possible. He was dressed he looked like— "He does it on purpose," Vincent said, his voice coming out rough. "He visits all the establishments in the group without warning, dressed simply, to see how the staff treats people who don't look like they have money." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing, Marcus had to sit down. His legs simply wouldn't hold him anymore. Megan, who had heard the entire conversation, brought her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide. "I tried to tell you," she murmured. "I tried to say we could give him a table." Vincent was already frantically dialing on his phone, trying to call Arthur Harrison. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried again and again. Each unanswered attempt was like a hammer striking the coffin of Marcus's career. "Vincent, I didn't know. How could I have known?" Marcus stood up, his voice coming out desperate. "Call him, explain it was a mistake." "A mistake?" Vincent turned to him, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage and panic. "You humiliated the owner of the entire group. You treated him like trash based purely on his appearance. But I do that to protect the restaurant's standards. You always praised me for knowing how to keep the right kind of clientele." The truth of those words hit Vincent like a punch. He had indeed, for years, allowed and even encouraged that behavior. Never explicitly, but with approving smiles when Marcus handled situations with customers who seemed out of place. "That's going to change," Vincent said quietly, more to himself than to Marcus. "Everything is going to change now." The rest of the shift was a nightmare. Marcus made mistakes he had never made in 2 decades of work. He spilled red wine on the white tablecloth of a table. He mixed up orders. He brought the wrong check to a regular customer who was visibly irritated. His mind kept replaying every cruel word he had said to Arthur Harrison, the way he had looked at him with disdain, the way he had suggested he go somewhere else, more suited to his budget. When his shift finally ended, at 10 at night, Marcus could barely think straight. He grabbed his things from the employee locker with mechanical movements. Megan walked past him without saying a word, but her look said it all. It was a mix of pity and something that felt like long overdue justice. On the bus heading home, Marcus stared out the window, watching the city pass by in a blur of lights. He lived with his wife, Martha, and their 2 children in a small but comfortable apartment. His salary at the restaurant, including the generous tips he received from customers he knew how to flatter, allowed for a decent life. But now, what would happen now? Martha was watching television when he walked in. She was a woman of 48, a teacher who had retired on disability after a car accident that left lasting damage to her spine. Her brown hair was tied up in a loose bun. "You're early today," she commented, without taking her eyes off the screen. Then she looked at him and noticed. "What happened?" "Nothing," Marcus lied, heading to the bedroom. "Just a headache." But it was a lie. It wasn't a headache. It was a crushing weight on his chest, a shame he had no words to express. He lay down on the bed without even taking off his uniform, staring at the ceiling in the dark. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Arthur Harrison's face. That expression of deep sorrow mixed with disappointment, as if he had seen that 1,000 times before, as if he had expected it, yet it still hurt. Marcus didn't sleep that night, nor the next one. The following morning he arrived at the restaurant 2 hours before his shift began. Vincent was already there, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a grim expression. "I got an email in the middle of the night," Vincent said without preamble, "from corporate headquarters. They want the full report on every employee. Complaint history, commendations, everything." Marcus felt his blood run cold. And what are they going to find in mine?" Vincent sighed, running a hand over his tired face. 5 formal complaints in the last 6 months, Marcus. All about preferential treatment, inappropriate comments about customers' appearance or financial situation. But you always buried those complaints. You always said I was doing the right thing. "I was wrong," Vincent admitted, and there was genuine shame in his voice. "And now we're all going to pay for it." The following days were pure agony. Marcus tried to work normally, but it was impossible. Every customer who walked in, he caught himself analyzing their clothes, the way they walked, and then he hated himself for it. How many times had he made judgments like that? How many people had he driven away based on appearance alone? Megan was promoted to afternoon shift supervisor. The news came in a quick team meeting. and Marcus felt the sharp irony of the situation. The girl he had treated with condescension for months, whom he was always correcting and belittling in front of the other staff, now had authority over him. "Congratulations," he managed to say, and the word came out bitter. "Thank you," Megan replied, her eyes meeting his with a new firmness. "I'm going to do a good job." And she did. In the following days, Megan implemented small changes Marcus had never considered. She greeted every customer the same way, with the same warm smile, regardless of how they were dressed. She redistributed the tables so there were no good tables and bad tables. She created a rotation system so that all waiters served all types of customers. Marcus watched all of this with a mixture of resentment and something he was reluctant to admit: respect. One afternoon, a week after the incident, Marcus was organizing silverware when a familiar voice made his heart stop. "Good afternoon." He turned slowly. Arthur Harrison was there, at the entrance of the restaurant. This time he was wearing different but still simple clothes, jeans and a light blue button-down shirt. Beside him, a man in a suit carried a leather briefcase. "Mr. Harrison," Marcus managed to say, his voice coming out weak. Arthur didn't respond immediately. He simply observed Marcus for a few seconds that felt far too long, then walked into the restaurant. Vincent came running out of his office, his face red. "Mr. Harrison, how wonderful to see you again. Please feel free to—" "I want all staff to gather in the meeting room in 15 minutes, Arthur interrupted gently but firmly. "Everyone." The next 15 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. He stood in the corner of the conference room, unable to look at anyone. Megan sat at the front, upright and attentive. The other waiters, Derek and Brooke, whispered nervously. The kitchen staff stood in the back. Arthur walked in, and the room fell into absolute silence. He placed his briefcase on the table but didn't open it. "My name is Arthur Harrison, and I'm the new owner of the Heritage Dining Group," he began, his voice calm but carrying weight. "Some of you already know me. Others are seeing me for the first time." He paused, his eyes scanning every face in the room. "I started my career washing dishes in a restaurant when I was 15. My mother worked as a cleaning lady, and my father had left when I was little. We had no money, but I had dreams. I dreamed of one day having my own place, a place where everyone would be treated with dignity." Marcus felt every word like a blade. "Over all these years, I've worked every position possible. I was an errand boy, a kitchen assistant, a waiter, a manager, and in every one of those positions I learned valuable things. But you know what taught me the most? Being humiliated." The silence in the room was sepulchral. "I was thrown out of stores because my clothes were dirty from work. I was treated as invisible in places where I had every right to be. I was judged by the color of my skin, by my accent, by the texture of my hair." Arthur took a deep breath before continuing. "Every time that happened, I promised myself that if I ever had the power to change things, I would. And now I have that power." He finally opened his briefcase and took out some documents. "I'm going to implement significant changes in all establishments of the group, starting with mandatory training on respect and inclusion. No customer will be judged by their appearance. No employee will be valued for their ability to turn people away." Marcus felt Arthur's gaze land on him for a brief second before moving on. "There will be consequences for those who don't follow these guidelines, but there will also be opportunities. Opportunities for growth for those who show true commitment to these values." Megan was beaming. Some employees seemed relieved. Others, like Derek, who had learned from Marcus the tricks to maximize tips through customer selection, seemed worried. When the meeting ended, Vincent asked Marcus to stay. Arthur also remained, along with the man in the suit who introduced himself as Grant from Human Resources. "Marcus," Vincent began, clearly rehearsed, "due to the incident last week and the previous complaints on your record, you'll receive a formal warning. You'll be on probation for the next 3 months." Marcus nodded, unable to speak. "But you won't be fired," Grant added. "Mr. Harrison believes in second chances." Marcus finally found the courage to look at Arthur. "Why?" he asked, his voice coming out hoarse. "After what I did." "Because firing you would be easy," Arthur replied. But it wouldn't solve anything. You represent a much bigger problem, a problem that exists in many places, and I'd rather try to solve the problem than simply hide it. Those words should have brought relief, but they only brought more shame. That night, Marcus finally told everything to Martha. He sat at the kitchen table and broke down, telling her every detail of what had happened. He told her about the humiliations he had inflicted over the years, always justified as maintaining the standard. He told her about the shame he felt, about the fear of losing his job. Martha listened in silence, her fingers drumming slowly on the table. When he finished, she stayed quiet for a long moment. "I knew," she said finally. Marcus looked up, surprised. "What?" "I knew about your behavior at work. Susan? Do you remember her? From church? Her daughter worked with you for a while. She told me stories about how you treated certain customers, about how you talked about people behind their backs. And you never said anything." "I was afraid," Martha admitted, tears in her eyes. "Afraid of how you'd react. Afraid you'd call me ungrateful, over-dramatic. You've changed so much over the years, Marcus. You used to be different." "Different how?" "Kind. Humble. Do you remember when we met? You were an office boy. I was a college student. You treated me like a queen, even though you had almost nothing. You held doors open for the elderly, helped people on the street. I fell in love with that man." The tears Marcus had held back for days finally came. He cried right there at the kitchen table, cried for the person he had become, for the disappointment in his wife's eyes, for the shame he would carry forever. "I don't know how I went backward," he said between sobs. "How I became this." "Little by little," Martha answered softly. "It was little by little. Each small promotion, each important customer you impressed, each generous tip you received. You began to believe that success came from serving only certain people, and you forgot that we're all just people." They sat in the kitchen until late at night, talking like they hadn't in years. Martha told him about the times she felt ashamed when she heard stories about his behavior. Marcus confessed about the deep insecurity he had always carried, coming from a poor family, always feeling he had to prove his worth. "You don't need to humiliate anyone to have worth," Martha said, holding his hand. "Your worth was always in who you are, not in who you serve or who you turn away." The following weeks were a test of emotional endurance. Marcus really tried to change, but decades of behavior don't disappear overnight. He'd catch himself making automatic judgments, sizing up customers by their clothes, before he even consciously thought about it. One day, a young couple walked into the restaurant. They were wearing simple clothes, jeans and basic t-shirts. Marcus's hand automatically moved to direct them to a table near the kitchen, away from the windows overlooking the square. Then he stopped. He stopped mid-gesture, aware of what he was about to do. "Good afternoon," he said, forcing a smile. "I have an excellent table by the window. Would you like to sit there?" The couple exchanged surprised looks. "Really?" the girl asked. "It doesn't have to be a special table." "All our tables are special," Marcus heard himself saying. "And so are all our customers." He led them to the best available table, the one with a panoramic view of the square with its centuries-old trees and the fountain. The same table he used to reserve only for customers he deemed important. When he brought the menu, he noticed the young man's hands trembling slightly. They studied the prices with obvious care, doing mental math. "Our daily special is really good," Marcus suggested gently. "And it's at a special price today." He was breaking the rules. The daily special wasn't on sale, but something inside him simply couldn't let that young couple have to choose the cheapest item in shame. The young man seemed relieved. "We'll have 2 daily specials then." When Marcus returned with their orders, he overheard part of their conversation. They were celebrating the girl's first job, after months of searching. They had saved up for weeks to be able to eat at a real place. Something broke inside him when he heard that. How many celebrations like that had he ruined over the years? How many small victories had he turned into humiliation? At the end of the meal, when he brought the check, he had included a complimentary dessert from the house. The couple protested, saying they couldn't accept it. Marcus insisted. "Congratulations on the new job," he said, and for the first time in weeks the smile was genuine. "I hope this is the beginning of many good things." The gratitude in their eyes was palpable. After they left, Marcus found a generous tip under the napkin, more than they could probably afford. He put the money in his pocket and felt something strange. It wasn't satisfaction over the amount. It was something different, something that took a while to identify. It was self-respect. Megan had watched everything from a distance. When Marcus walked past her, she gave a small nod of approval. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. 2 months after the initial incident, Marcus began to notice changes in the regular customers. Some of those who used to praise him for his careful selection now came less frequently. One of them, a businessman named Mr. Wentworth, who always asked for Marcus's table and gave generous tips to be treated like royalty, even complained directly. "Marcus, what happened to this place?" Mr. Wentworth muttered, while Marcus poured his wine. "There are all kinds of people here now. Yesterday there was a whole family, the kids making noise. They're all our customers, Mr. Wentworth," Marcus replied, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. "They all deserve to be here." Mr. Wentworth looked at him as if he had grown a second head. "But before you understood that some places should maintain a certain standard." "I was wrong," Marcus said simply. Mr. Wentworth dropped his napkin on the table forcefully. "Well then, I guess I'll find another restaurant that still values its important customers. I'll miss you, Mr. Wentworth, but I understand your decision." When Mr. Wentworth stormed out without even finishing his meal, Marcus expected to feel panic. That was a customer who spent a lot and gave huge tips, but all he felt was a strange relief, as if he had gotten rid of a weight he didn't know he was carrying. Vincent had seen everything from the counter. He approached with a worried expression. "That's going to come out of your pocket," he said. "I know." "He spent a lot here." "I know." Vincent studied Marcus's face for a long moment. "You've changed." It wasn't a question, it was an observation. Marcus just nodded. That week, Arthur Harrison made another unannounced visit. This time he stayed the whole day, discreetly observing every interaction, every detail of how the restaurant operated. Marcus was aware of his presence and tried his best to show genuine change, but his nervousness betrayed him. While serving an elderly lady who had come alone, Marcus dropped a cup of coffee. It didn't fall on her, but it made enough noise to draw attention. His hands trembled as he cleaned up the mess. "I'm sorry," he muttered to the lady. "I'll bring another coffee right away." "Don't worry, dear," she said gently. "We all have difficult days." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. When Marcus returned with the new coffee, his hands were still trembling. The lady looked at him with concern. "Are you okay?" "I am, Ma'am." "Thank you for asking." "You know, I came here a few months ago," she said, stirring the sugar into her coffee. "I was with my granddaughter, a wonderful girl who's a doctor. But she was coming straight from her shift, wearing her hospital scrubs. A waiter treated us very badly, as if we didn't belong here. We decided we'd never come back." Marcus's heart sank. He remembered that situation. He remembered judging the young woman by her stained work clothes, suggesting they wait outside because they clearly had come to the wrong place. "It was me," he said quietly. "I was that waiter." The lady looked at him in surprise. "Oh, and I'm so sorry," Marcus continued, the words coming out difficult but necessary. "Immensely. I was wrong, completely wrong, and if I could go back in time—" "But you can't," the lady interrupted, not with cruelty, but with realism. "No one can. The only thing we can do is try to be better from here on." "That's what I'm trying to do," Marcus admitted. "I can see that," she said with a small smile. "And that's why I decided to give this place another chance. My granddaughter is busy today, but I promised to tell her how it went." When the lady left, Marcus had to sit down for a minute. Her words echoed in his mind. "The only thing we can do is try to be better from here on." At the end of the shift, Arthur asked to speak with Marcus in private again. They went to the same meeting room where everything had started months ago. "Why didn't you fire me?" Marcus asked before Arthur could speak. "After what I did, it would have been the easiest thing." Arthur leaned back in his chair, fingers intertwined. "Can I tell you a story?" Marcus nodded. "When I was 25, I was managing my first restaurant," Arthur began. "I was desperate to prove my worth, to show that I deserved that position. I had an employee, a young man named Simon, who made a mistake, an honest mistake. He mixed up orders and served the wrong dish to an important client." He paused, his eyes distant with the memory. "I humiliated him in front of the entire staff. I yelled at him, called him incompetent, said he would never be anything. I wanted to show authority, to show that I had control. That young man left the restaurant in tears." Marcus felt a tightness in his chest, hearing the pain in Arthur's voice. That very night, Simon had a nervous breakdown. He was already struggling with depression, with personal problems I didn't even know about. That humiliation was the last straw. He spent weeks hospitalized. "My God," Marcus murmured. "When I found out, I went to visit him. I apologized, tried to explain, but the damage was done. He never came back to the restaurant business. He gave up his dream because of me, and I carry that guilt to this day." Arthur looked directly at Marcus. "That changed me. It made me swear I would never again use my power to crush someone, that I would always try to see the person behind the mistake, because we are all imperfect human beings trying to do the best we can." "But what I did was different," Marcus protested. "It wasn't an honest mistake, it was deliberate cruelty." "It was," Arthur agreed without hesitation. "But cruelty usually comes from pain, from insecurity, from fear, and that can be healed. It can be changed, if the person truly wants to change. And do you think I want to? I think you're trying. I saw how you treated that young couple last week. I saw how you apologized to that lady today. Real change doesn't happen overnight, it's a process, and you're in the middle of that process." Marcus felt hot tears in his eyes. "I have a question," he said. "Why did you walk in here that day dressed like that?" Arthur smiled sadly. "Because it's the only way to know the truth about a place. You never know the true character of an establishment by the way they treat rich or important people. You know it by the way they treat people who seem to have no power. That's where true nature reveals itself." "And I failed the test," Marcus said quietly. "But you're getting a second chance to learn the lesson." After that conversation, something definitively changed in Marcus. It was no longer about keeping his job or avoiding punishment. It was about genuinely wanting to be a better person. He started arriving earlier to help the cleaning crew. Mrs. Gladys, a 60-year-old woman who cleaned the bathrooms and washed dishes, looked at him suspiciously the first time. "What do you want?" she asked, gripping the broom tightly. "I just wanted to help set up the tables before opening." "Why?" It was a good question. Why, after 20 years of ignoring the cleaning crew's work, did he suddenly want to help? "Because I realized I never gave your work the value it deserved," Marcus replied honestly, "and I want to change that." Mrs. Gladys studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Oh, you can start by taking the chairs off the tables then." It was simple physical work that Marcus hadn't done in years. His back ached by the end of it, but there was something liberating about it. Working side by side with people he had considered inferior for so long, he discovered fascinating stories. Mrs. Gladys had been a university professor in her youth. She had to give up her career to care for her sick mother. Later, when she tried to go back, she was too old to be hired. Cleaning was what she could find. "But it's honest work," she said, while wiping down the tables, "and I do it with dignity." Marcus thought about all the times he had looked at her without really seeing her. How many stories like hers had he missed because of pure prejudice? Caleb, the dishwasher, was a 22-year-old young man studying engineering at night. He worked from 5 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon at the restaurant, then rushed off to college. He had a full scholarship, but needed to pay rent and help his mother. "It's not easy," Caleb admitted while stacking clean plates. "But my mother always said there's no shame in honest work. It doesn't matter what you do, it matters how you do it." These conversations, these stories, were like mirrors showing Marcus everything he had neglected, all the humanity he had ignored in his blind pursuit of status and hefty tips. 3 months after the initial incident, the time came for the final evaluation of his probation period. Marcus was in Vincent's office with Grant from HR, and to his surprise, Megan was there too. "We asked Megan to be here because as shift supervisor, she had the best view of your daily behavior," Vincent explained. Megan had a folder with notes. Marcus felt his heart race. "Marcus has shown significant change in behavior," she began, reading her notes. "He treats all customers with equal respect, regardless of appearance. He helps other employees without being asked. He accepts constructive criticism without defensiveness." She paused before continuing. "There were a few stumbles, occasions where I saw automatic judgment surface, but he corrects himself quickly, and more importantly, I see genuine effort." "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. "Don't thank me yet," Megan replied, "because I'm going to be honest about something. There are still customers who complain that you treated them poorly in the past, people who saw you humiliate others. That reputation is going to follow you, and it's going to take a long time to change that, if it ever changes." The words hurt because they were true. A few weeks earlier, a customer had refused to be served by him specifically, telling Vincent that man was already far too rude to me in the past. "I know," Marcus said, "and I'll have to live with that." "Here's our decision," Grant said, opening his own folder. "Your probation period ends today. You will remain employed, but with one condition." Marcus held his breath. "You will take part in a new program that Mr. Harrison is implementing across the entire Heritage Dining Group, a mentorship program where veteran employees will help train new members in humanized customer service." Marcus blinked, confused. "Me? But after everything I've done?" "Exactly because of what you did," Vincent explained. "Mr. Harrison believes that someone who has made deep mistakes can teach others to avoid the same mistakes. If you accept, of course." I accept. Of course I accept." But the decision brought a new discomfort. How could he teach others when he was still learning? How could he be a mentor when his own journey was far from complete? The answer came a few weeks later, when the first apprentice arrived. He was a 19-year-old young man named Justin, newly hired as a junior waiter. Marcus was supposed to train him over the next 2 months. Justin was too confident for his age, with that gleam in his eyes of someone who thought he knew everything. Marcus found himself looking into a mirror of the past. "The first thing you need to understand," Marcus began on the first day, "is that every person who walks through that door deserves respect, no matter how they're dressed, how much money they have, or where they come from." Sure, Justin said distractedly, looking at his phone. "But everyone knows some customers are better than others, right? The ones who spend more, the ones who leave fat tips." Marcus felt a pang. Those were exactly the words he would have said years ago. "No," he said firmly. "That mindset will destroy you. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but one day it will. Believe me, I know this." Justin looked at him skeptically. "With all due respect, Marcus, but you're not exactly the prime example of success here, are you? I heard you almost got fired a few months back." The truth of those words was like a punch, but Marcus took a deep breath. "It's true, and you know why? Because for 20 years I believed exactly what you're saying, that some customers were better than others, that judging people by their appearance was smart, that flattering the rich and looking down on the poor was the path to success." He pointed to a table where a simple family was having dinner, the children sharing a single soda to save money. "See that family? Years ago I would have treated them with contempt. I would have given them the worst table, cold service, maybe even suggested they go somewhere else. And you know what I would have lost? What? The chance to be human, to make a difference in someone's life, to be part of a celebration no matter how simple. That father over there is proud to be able to bring his family out for dinner. Those children will remember this moment for the rest of their lives, and I almost threw that away out of pure arrogance." Justin went quiet, processing. "You don't have to believe me right now," Marcus continued, "but pay attention, watch, see the gratitude on someone's face when they're treated with dignity, when they expected contempt. That's worth more than any fat tip." Justin's training became a journey of self-reflection for Marcus. Every lesson he taught was a lesson he was still learning himself. Every mistake Justin made was a chance for Marcus to remember his own mistakes. One day, Justin was serving an elderly man in shabby clothes when Marcus saw him hesitate. He saw the judgment passing through the young man's eyes, the decision forming to give minimal service. Marcus approached discreetly. "Justin, can I talk to you for a second?" They went over to the corner. "I saw that look," Marcus said quietly. "I know it well. I've been there. I don't know what you're talking about. You're judging that customer by his clothes, thinking about giving him quick, minimal service to get rid of him fast." Justin opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it. "Is it that obvious? To someone who's done the same 1,000 times? Yes. But Marcus, be realistic. He's clearly not going to spend much. He's not going to leave a good tip. Why waste energy?" Marcus took a deep breath before answering. "Can I tell you a story?" And then he told his story. He told about Arthur Harrison walking into the restaurant months ago. He told about every cruel word he had said, every judgment he had made. He told about the crushing shame when he found out who the man really was. "But it's not even about him being the owner," Marcus said. "It's about the fact that he was a person who deserved respect. And I denied him that based on—" "What? On his clothes? What kind of ridiculous standard is that?" Justin was pale. "What if that gentleman over there is also the owner?" "It doesn't matter if he's the owner or a homeless man," Marcus replied. "He deserves to be treated with dignity because he's a human being, not because he can benefit us in some way." That conversation changed something in Justin. In the days that followed, Marcus saw the young man genuinely making an effort to treat all customers equally. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. During that time, Marcus also developed an unexpected relationship with Megan. They started having coffee together before their shifts, talking about the challenges of everyday life. "You know what hurt me the most?" Megan said one day. "It wasn't even you correcting me in front of the customers. It was the fact that you never saw me. To you, I was invisible unless I made a mistake." "I know," Marcus said, "and I'm so sorry. You've already apologized several times." "But it will never be enough, will it?" Megan thought before answering. "Honestly, no, it never will be. Apologies don't erase years of humiliation, but your actions from here on can build something new. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but mutual respect. That's all I can ask for. And you're asking for it through actions, not just words. That matters." That frank conversation established a new foundation between them. Not friendship, exactly, but genuine professional respect. 6 months after the initial incident, Arthur Harrison called a general meeting at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. All managers and key employees from every franchise of the Heritage Dining Group were summoned. Marcus received the invitation and spent the night before without sleeping, imagining it would be the moment for some important announcement. Maybe his definitive dismissal. The hotel ballroom was full. There must have been about 200 people there, from all the Heritage Dining Group restaurants spread across the region. Marcus stood in the back trying to be invisible. Arthur stepped onto the makeshift stage and began talking about the past 6 months, about the changes implemented, the challenges faced, the results achieved. "Overall customer satisfaction has increased by 40%, he announced. But more importantly, we've received hundreds of messages from people thanking us for finally feeling welcome in our establishments." He showed some slides with testimonials, an elderly woman thanking us for being treated with patience when she took a long time to decide her order, a young student grateful for being well received even though he came straight from work in dirty clothes, a large family celebrating that they could have dinner together without feeling judged. "These are the victories that matter," Arthur said. "They're not the numbers on the balance sheet. They're the lives we touch." Then he announced the new mentoring program. He explained the philosophy behind it, using the experience of mistakes to teach others how to avoid them. "And to lead this program, I chose a few mentors, people who made mistakes, who learned, and who can now teach." Marcus felt his stomach churn when his name was called. "Marcus Sterling, please come up here to the front." The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus walked to the stage with trembling legs, conscious of every eye on him. "Marcus," Arthur said into the microphone, "would you like to share your story?" It was the last thing Marcus wanted to do, exposing his shame to 200 people. But he looked into Arthur's eyes and saw encouragement, not judgment. "My name is Marcus Sterling," he began, his voice coming out weak before steadying itself. "And 6 months ago, I made one of the worst mistakes of my professional life." And then he told them. He told them about humiliating Arthur at the restaurant door. He told them about years of arrogance, of judging people by their appearance, of believing that status mattered more than humanity. "I turned my job into a system of oppression," he said, surprising himself with his own honesty. "I used my small amount of power to make other people feel small. And why? Because it made me feel big." The room was absolutely silent. "I am here today not as an example of success," Marcus continued. "I am here as an example of someone who failed deeply and is trying to do better. And I will carry this shame for the rest of my life. But I will also carry the responsibility of making sure others don't make the same mistakes." When he finished, there was no applause. Just a heavy, reflective silence. Marcus returned to his seat, feeling exposed, but also, strangely, lighter. Other mentors shared their stories. A manager who had unfairly fired employees, a supervisor who had created a toxic environment. Each story was a mirror of human imperfection. At the end of the meeting, several people approached Marcus, some to share their own stories of failure, others to thank him for his honesty. An older waiter, who worked at another franchise, shook Marcus's hand firmly. "Thank you," he said simply. "I was on the path you were on. You woke me up before it was too late." That interaction stayed with Marcus, the idea that his shame, his failure, could serve as a warning to others. It didn't erase what he had done, but it gave purpose to the pain. In the following months, the mentorship program expanded. Marcus trained new employees not just in customer service techniques, but in basic humanity. He shared real stories, including his own failures. "You're going to make mistakes," he told each new group. "We all do. The question is, what we do afterward. Do we justify ourselves and repeat them, or do we learn and grow?" One of his trainees, a 20-year-old girl named Chloe, stood out in particular. She had a natural sensitivity for reading people, for understanding when someone was feeling uncomfortable or insecure. "How did you learn to do that?" Marcus asked one day. "My mum works as a cleaning lady," Chloe replied. "I watched her being treated like she was invisible her whole life. I learned that everyone has a story, everyone deserves to be seen." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to hit, like, and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Marcus felt a pang hearing that. How many mothers like Chloe's had he treated with contempt? How many stories had he failed to see? "You're going to be better at this than I ever was," he admitted. "Maybe," Chloe said, "but you're teaching me to never become what you were. That has value." A year after the initial incident, Marcus was setting up the tables one morning when he saw a familiar man walk in. It took a second to recognize him. It was the man in worn-out clothes he had intercepted months ago, right after the incident with Arthur. The same one a newly hired waiter had tried to turn away before Marcus intervened. The man recognized him too. His eyes widened, clearly ready to leave. "Sir, please," Marcus said quickly. "Give me a chance." The man hesitated at the door. "Please have a seat. Any table you want. On me." "I don't need charity." "It's not charity. It's an inadequate apology for unforgivable behavior." The man studied Marcus for a long moment, then slowly walked inside. Marcus led him to the best table, by the window overlooking the square. "I remember you," the man said when Marcus brought the menu. "You were rude to me." "I was, and I have no excuse for that. Why did you change?" Marcus could have told him about Arthur Harrison, about almost losing his job, about the whole process of transformation. But he decided on the simpler truth, because I realized I was being a horrible person, and I decided to try to be better. The man nodded slowly. "My name is Pedro," he said, "and I've been living on the street for 3 years." Marcus felt the impact of those words. "I do odd jobs when I can," Pedro continued. "I save money for weeks so I can eat at a real place once a month. It makes me feel human again, you know." "I understand," Marcus said, and this time he truly did. But most of the time, I'm treated exactly the way you treated me that day, as if I didn't belong, as if my presence contaminated the place. I'm sorry, Marcus said, the words coming from the depths of his soul. From the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry. Pedro ordered the daily special and a coffee. When Marcus brought it, the plate was a little fuller than usual. Not much, just enough to make a difference. At the end of the meal, Marcus brought a slice of cake. I didn't order this. I know, it's on the house. Everyone deserves dessert sometimes. Pedro looked at the cake with eyes shining with restrained tears. Thank you. When it came time to pay, Marcus watched Pedro carefully count every crumpled bill, every coin. The man had exactly enough for the daily special and the coffee, with nothing left over for a tip. The dessert is included with today's special, Marcus lied gently. No need to pay extra. Pedro knew it was a lie, but accepted it with dignity. You really have changed, he said as he left. I'm trying. Keep trying. That interaction stayed with Marcus for days. He began to realize that real change wasn't a destination, but an ongoing journey. It wasn't something you achieved and then stopped. It was a daily process of consciously choosing humanity over judgment. A few weeks later, during a team meeting, Megan announced that she had been promoted to regional manager. She would now oversee several restaurants in the Heritage Dining Group. Congratulations, Marcus said sincerely after the meeting. You deserve it. Thank you, she replied. And Marcus, I want to ask you something. What is it? I'm going to need a shift supervisor here. Someone who understands what we're trying to build. Someone who can train others not just in techniques but in values. Marcus took a moment to understand. Are you offering me the position? I am, if you want it. But after everything. Exactly because of everything, Megan interrupted. You know both versions of yourself, the terrible one and the one trying to be better. That helps you understand both the mistakes and the path to correcting them. Marcus had to sit down. I don't know if I'm worthy of this. Dignity is something we build daily, Megan said. Not something we either have or don't. And you're building yours. So, do you accept? Yes, Marcus said, his voice choked with emotion. I accept. The promotion brought new responsibilities and new challenges. Marcus was now responsible not only for his own behavior, but for shaping the culture of the entire team. He implemented small changes that made a big difference. He created a Moments of Dignity board, where employees could share stories of times they had treated customers with exceptional respect. It wasn't about tips or important customers. It was about small acts of humanity. Chloe was the first to contribute, writing about an elderly woman who had come alone on her birthday. Chloe had stayed talking with her throughout the entire dinner, keeping her company. At the end, the whole team sang Happy Birthday. She cried, Chloe wrote. She said her children had forgotten her birthday, that she had come to the restaurant so she wouldn't be alone at home, and that for the first time in weeks, she felt like someone cared. Marcus read that and felt a tightness in his chest. How many opportunities like that had he wasted over the years? Justin, his first apprentice, had also matured significantly. One day, Marcus caught him talking to a group of teenagers who were being loud and disturbing other customers. Hey guys, you need to keep it down a bit, Justin said, but without condescension. But before you go, is anyone here vegetarian? Because our chef created a new vegetarian dish and he's giving out free samples for feedback. The teenagers got excited about the possibility of free food and agreed to make less noise. Problem solved without humiliation. Well done, Marcus praised him afterward. How did you come up with that? You taught me that there's always a way to solve problems while keeping everyone's dignity intact, Justin replied. They're just kids having fun. They didn't need to be embarrassed. Marcus felt genuine pride. It wasn't the arrogant kind of pride he used to feel when he flattered wealthy customers. It was something different, the pride of contributing to something bigger than himself. Arthur Harrison now visited the restaurant regularly, but no longer as a secret test. He came openly, talked with the team, and sometimes ate with them in the kitchen. On one of those visits, he pulled Marcus aside. "I have a proposal for you," Arthur said. "Go ahead. I want to expand the mentorship program to other restaurant chains, not just ours. Create a larger project about humanizing customer service, and I want you to be one of the lead coordinators." Marcus was speechless for a moment. "Me? But there are far more qualified people." "Maybe, but few with your story. Few who can speak with moral authority about both sides of the coin." "Arthur, I still carry the shame of what I did. I still wake up sometimes thinking about that day." "Good," Arthur said simply. "That shame keeps you honest. It keeps you humble. It's what ensures you'll never go back to being who you were." "But what if I fail again?" "You will fail. Everyone fails sometimes. The question is how you handle failure. And you've already proven you can learn from it." Marcus accepted the position. In the following months, he began traveling to different restaurants, giving trainings and talks. He always started with his own story. He always exposed his shame first, before trying to teach anything. "I'm not here as an example of what to do," he would tell each new audience. "I'm here as an example of what not to do, and of what to do when you've already done the wrong thing." The reactions varied. Some hated him, thought he didn't deserve that position after what he had done. Others connected with the brutal honesty of the story. At one particularly difficult training, a veteran waiter aggressively confronted Marcus. "Who are you to come here and teach me? I heard your story. You humiliated people for years, and now you want to play the saint?" "I don't want to play the saint," Marcus replied calmly. "I'll never be a saint, and you're right to question me. But can I ask you something?" "What?" "Have you ever treated someone badly based on that person's appearance?" The man hesitated. "Everyone's done that at some point." "Then you have two choices. You can keep doing it and hope you never get caught red-handed. Or you can learn from my mistake and change before you end up where I ended up. The choice is yours." The waiter wasn't convinced that day, but 3 months later, Marcus received an email from him. A long email recounting how he had changed his approach, about the difference it had made, about the gratitude of a customer who had been treated with respect when expecting contempt. "I still think you don't deserve to be in this position," the email ended. "But I thank you for the lesson. It saved me from becoming you." Marcus reread that email several times. "It saved me from becoming you." It was the best and worst thing anyone could say to him, but it was true. And it had value. 2 years after the initial incident, Marcus was at home on a Sunday when he received a call from an unknown number. "Hello? Marcus Sterling?" a female voice asked. "Yes, that's me. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm a journalist, and I'm doing a story on humanization programs in customer service. Arthur Harrison gave me your contact." Marcus's heart raced. Media, public exposure of his story. "I don't know if I'm the best person for this." "According to Mr. Harrison, you're exactly the right person. Can I ask you some questions?" The interview lasted almost 2 hours. Claire asked difficult questions about the years of cruel behavior, about specific customers Marcus had humiliated, about the shame he carried. "Do you think you've redeemed yourself?" she asked at the end. "No," Marcus answered without hesitation. "Redemption implies the debt has been paid. Mine never will be. But I'm trying to at least minimize future harm by offsetting it with positive actions." That's a very honest answer. It's the only one I have. The story came out a few weeks later in the State Herald. It was long, detailed, and didn't spare Marcus at all. It told of his flaws, his arrogance, his cruelties, but it also told of the transformation, the mentorship program, the impact on other people. The reactions were mixed. Some praised the honesty, others said he didn't deserve a second chance. There was even a small wave of people saying they would boycott the Heritage Dining Group for keeping Marcus employed. Arthur Harrison responded publicly, "We believe in second chances. We believe people can change. Marcus Sterling is not a hero. He is an imperfect man trying to do better. And that's all we can ask of anyone." A month after the story was published, Marcus received a letter. It was handwritten on plain paper. "Mr. Marcus, my name is Miriam. You don't know me, but I know you. Or rather, I knew who you were. 3 years ago, I went to your restaurant with my husband to celebrate our wedding anniversary. We had saved up for months for that dinner. My husband was wearing an old suit, the best one he had. I wore a simple dress that I had altered. You treated us like trash. You gave us a table hidden away. You served us rudely. You made sarcastic comments about our order when we chose the cheapest options. I left there crying. My husband passed away last year. That was our last wedding anniversary. And when I think of that day, I think of the shame I felt, not the joy it should have been. I read the story about you in the newspaper. I read about your transformation. Part of me wants to hate you, wants you to suffer the way you made me suffer. But another part recognizes that holding on to that hatred only hurts me. So this letter is to tell you two things. First, what you did was unforgivable. Second, even so I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I hope you keep trying to be better, and I hope no one ever feels what I felt that day. Miriam Hastings. Marcus read the letter 3 times. Then he put it in the drawer of his bedside table. Whenever he felt he was getting too comfortable that he had done enough, he would reread that letter. It was a constant reminder of the real harm he had caused real people. He never replied to the letter. There was no adequate response, but he added Miriam Hastings' name to his mental list of people he had wronged, a list he would carry forever. The mentoring program continued to grow. Other restaurants, from other chains, began implementing adapted versions. Marcus was invited to give lectures at hospitality schools and customer service conferences. Every time he stepped on a stage, he felt uncomfortable. He didn't see himself as someone worthy of being there. But Arthur always told him, it's exactly that discomfort that qualifies you. When you start feeling comfortable, that's when you'll have a problem. 3 years after the initial incident, Marcus and Martha were at home on a Saturday night when the phone rang. It was late, almost midnight. Hello? Marcus, it's Vincent. Sorry to call so late. Did something happen? A fire started in the restaurant kitchen. Everything is under control now. No one was hurt. But the place will be closed for a few months for renovations. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Oh my God. And the team? What's going to happen to them? Mr. Harrison has already guaranteed salaries during the renovation period, and there will be temporary placements at the other restaurants in the network. But he wants to gather everyone tomorrow morning to explain in person. The next day, the entire team gathered at a nearby community hall. Arthur explained the situation, the renovation plans, the temporary placements. I know it's scary, he said. Change always is. But I promise we'll take care of all of you. After the meeting, Arthur pulled Marcus aside. I've been thinking. The renovation will take at least 4 months. Maybe it's an opportunity. An opportunity for what? For you to do something you've been planning. That project to open a training center for the mentoring program. We could use this time to structure everything. It was true. Marcus had casually mentioned the idea a few weeks earlier, a place dedicated to training people in humanized service, but he never imagined it would be possible. Arthur, that would require a lot of investment. I have interested investors, but more importantly, I have you, someone who deeply understands the problem we're trying to solve. The following months were intense. Marcus worked with a small team to develop a complete training curriculum. It wasn't just about service techniques. It was about empathy, about recognizing one's own biases, about consciously choosing humanity. Megan was instrumental in this process. She brought the perspective of someone who had been a victim of mistreatment in the workplace and managed to turn it into a learning experience. We need to include a module on microaggressions, she said during one of the planning meetings. Those small cruelties that seem insignificant, but add up. Like what? One of the curriculum developers asked. Like when Marcus would always correct me in front of customers, but never did the same with the male waiters, Megan explained without bitterness, just as a fact. Or how he always called older customers sir and ma'am, but called me girl even though I was 25. Marcus hadn't realized he was doing that at the time, but listening to Megan list the behaviors, he recognized them all. This needs to be in the training, he agreed, because most people don't realize what they're doing. I didn't. The training center opened 6 months after the fire. It was a modest but functional space with classrooms, a demonstration kitchen, and practice areas. The first class had 20 people, waiters, attendants, managers, all there to learn not just techniques but values. Marcus opened the first day of class the same way he opened all his lectures, with his own story of failure. "My name is Marcus Sterling," he said, "and I'll start by telling you about the worst day of my professional life, the day I humiliated my future employer without knowing who he was." But then he added something new. But that wasn't really the worst day. The worst day was years before, when I started believing that some people were worth less than others. That was the day I lost my humanity. The rest was just a consequence. The training weeks were intense. There were practical exercises, group discussions, moments of deep reflection. Some participants resisted at first, arguing that they'd always done it that way or that customers don't care about these things. "Customers do care," Marcus would always say, "because customers are people, and people always care when they're treated with contempt." A participant named Helena was particularly resistant. She had worked in fine dining restaurants for 15 years and was proud of her ability to maintain standards. "But that's how the market works," she argued. "Exclusive places need to be, well, exclusive." "Exclusive in quality, yes," Marcus replied, "but not in who deserves respect. Exclusivity of food, of atmosphere, of service? Great. But exclusivity of human dignity? That's just cruelty disguised as sophistication." Helena wasn't convinced, until the third day of training when they did a role-playing exercise. Helena had to play a customer being mistreated by an arrogant waiter. The waiter was played by a hired actor who was deliberately cruel, using every technique Helena probably used in her own work. After 5 minutes of the exercise, Helena had tears in her eyes. She asked to stop. "I didn't know," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know what it was like and how much it hurts." "Now you know," Marcus said gently, "and you'll never be able to not know again." That exercise was transformative for several participants. Seeing from the outside the behavior they had normalized, feeling firsthand the impact of casual cruelties. At the end of the 6 weeks of training, each participant had to develop a personal change project. Not a project for others, but for themselves. Identify their own behavior patterns and create strategies to change them. Helena presented a detailed plan on how to implement equal treatment at the restaurant where she worked. It included staff training, changes to the table layout to eliminate location-based hierarchies, and a customer feedback system about how they were treated. "Very good," Marcus praised. "But tell me something. Why do you want to do this?" "Because I don't ever want to make someone feel the way I felt in that exercise. It's that simple." "It's that simple," Marcus repeated. "And sometimes it really is that simple." 4 years after the initial incident, Marcus found himself in a situation he never imagined. The training center was well established, with multiple classes per year. The mentorship program had expanded to other cities. He had even published a book about his journey, with the brutally honest title, "From Contempt to Respect: Confessions of a Cruel Waiter." The book didn't sell much. It wasn't the kind of inspiring story people wanted. It was uncomfortable, raw, without clean redemption. But those who read it said it changed something in them. On a Thursday afternoon, Marcus was at the training center preparing materials for the next class when he received an unexpected visit. Pedro, the homeless man he had waited on a year earlier, was at the door. But Pedro looked different, clean, shaved, wearing simple but new clothes. "Pedro," Marcus said, surprised. "You look different." "I got a job," Pedro said with a shy smile. "I'm working at a shelter, helping out in the kitchen. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work. And I have a small room now." "That's wonderful." "I came to thank you. I don't know if you remember, but you treated me with respect when I needed it most. You made me feel human again, and that made a difference." Marcus felt his eyes sting. "Pedro, I only did what I should have done all along. But you did it, and that matters." Pedro extended his hand. "Thank you." After Pedro left, Marcus sat at his desk for a long time. rethinking everything. About the winding path he had traveled since that horrible day 4 years ago. He was no longer the person he had been, but he also wasn't the person he wanted to be. He was somewhere in between, a work eternally in progress. Martha showed up at the training center late in the afternoon. They had agreed to go out for dinner to celebrate their wedding anniversary. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," he replied, grabbing his coat. They went to a simple restaurant, an unpretentious place where the food was good and the service warm. While they ate, Martha held his hand across the table. "I'm proud of you," she said, "of the man you've become." "I'm still becoming," Marcus corrected. "I always will be. And that's why I'm proud." That night, on the way home, Marcus thought about all the people who had been part of his journey. Arthur Harrison, who had seen potential where he could have seen only failure. Megan, who had chosen to work with him instead of against him. Justin, Chloe, and all the apprentices who trusted him to guide them. Miriam Hastings, who had found the strength to forgive the unforgivable. Pedro, who had given him the chance to do things differently. But above all, he thought about the people he would never meet. Those he had humiliated over the years and who never came back. Those who carried the scars of his cruel judgments. Those he could never apologize to in person. It was for them that he kept trying. Not because he could undo the past, but because he could perhaps prevent others from causing the same kind of harm. 5 years after the initial incident, Arthur Harrison announced his retirement. Not complete, but partial. He would hand over the day-to-day management of the chain to a younger team. At his farewell party, he gave a speech that Marcus would never forget. "I built this chain with sweat and tears," Arthur said. "But that's not what makes me most proud. What makes me proud is the culture we created. A culture where human dignity comes first." He looked directly at Marcus. "And that culture was possible because we chose to believe in transformation, because we understood that every person carries within themselves both the potential for cruelty and for kindness. The question is which one we choose to feed." The party went on through the night, but Marcus left early. He had a new class starting at the training center the next morning. As he passed by the original restaurant, now fully renovated after the fire, Marcus stopped for a moment. He looked at the entrance where it had all begun, the place where he had humiliated Arthur Harrison 5 years earlier. The sign on the door now read, "Everyone is welcome here, always." It was a small phrase, but it represented a revolution. Marcus walked in. The night shift was still underway. Chloe was managing the dining room now, only 23 years old, but already showing natural leadership. Justin was serving a large family, handling the noisy children with patience and good humor. An elderly gentleman in simple clothes walked in and hesitated at the door, as if expecting to be turned away. Chloe approached him immediately. "Good evening, sir, welcome. We have an excellent table near the fireplace if you'd like." The relief on the man's face was visible. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest watching that scene. It was so simple, so easy to make someone feel welcome. Why had it taken him so long to learn? He left the restaurant and walked to the bus stop. It was a cold night, but clear. The stars were visible despite the city lights. On the bus, sitting by the window, Marcus thought about the road still ahead of him. More classes to train, more people to try to reach, more mistakes he would inevitably make and have to correct. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel only shame when he thought about the past. He felt something more complex. Shame, yes, there would always be shame, but also gratitude for the chance to change, responsibility for the transformation, and a silent commitment, renewed every day, to keep trying to be better. When he got home, Martha was already asleep. Marcus went to his children's room, teenagers now, and watched them sleep for a moment. He wanted them to grow up being the kind of person he was trying to become, not the kind of person he had been. Before going to sleep, Marcus pulled from his pocket a small card he always carried. On it was written in his own handwriting, "Remember, you don't serve people, you serve humanity, and humanity exists in everyone, without exception." It was his mantra, his moral compass, his constant reminder that the journey never ended. The next day, he would be at the training center at 7 in the morning. he would have 20 new students, each carrying their own prejudices, their own flaws, their own potential for change. And he would begin, as always, with his own story. With honest shame, without excuses, but also with hope. Hope that if he, Marcus Sterling, the cruel waiter who judged people by their appearance, who humiliated those he considered inferior, who used small power to make others feel small, if he could change, then anyone could. It wasn't a story of complete redemption. It never would be. The damage he caused was real. The people he hurt didn't disappear just because he had gotten better, but it was a story of possibility. The possibility that recognizing wrongdoing, even deep wrongdoing, doesn't have to be the end. It can be a beginning, a difficult, painful beginning, full of shame and hard work. But a beginning nonetheless. And Marcus Sterling, 5 years after his worst mistake, kept trying. Not because it was easy, not because he felt forgiven, but because he had learned, finally, that every person who crosses our path carries a universe of experiences, pains, dreams, and dignity. And everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves to be treated as the precious human being they are. No matter the clothes, no matter the bank account, no matter the appearance, everyone deserves dignity. And that lesson, learned in the hardest way possible, was the legacy Marcus was determined to pass on. One student at a time, one day at a time, one conscious choice at a time, forever. The end of the story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe Marcus truly changed, or was he just trying to keep his job? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. We'd love to read your point of view. Thank you so much for your company, and don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories.